Hey developers, so today we got something really cool. We are looking at the latest Vue.js 3 with Vuex 4 with TypeScript. So we're gonna take a look at a really cool way of creating our apps with types. That way our Vuex store is a lot easier to use and we get types. Now for a long time, I've actually been playing around with TypeScript in Vue, and I noticed at times the TypeScript integration with Vue isn't that great, but I think it's just getting better all the time. And this new Vuex 4 with TypeScript is really, really cool. But with that said, I just wanna let you guys know it is kind of TypeScript heavy. You're gonna have to set up your own types. And so I am going to kind of explain the different ways you can set up TypeScript in here, but it might be a little bit high level. I would highly suggest look at the TypeScript official documentation if any of these concepts are a little too much. Also, I'll include a link in the description below to the GitHub repository. I created a branch called Vuex and a master branch. The master branch is the before and the Vuex is after, if you guys kind of want to see how that changes. Oh yeah, I'm just gonna give myself a little bit of a plug. I do tons of tutorials and videos on my YouTube channel, but if you guys are looking for really great courses, I actually have some Vue courses. I have a new course that I'm actually coming up with right now. I put a link in the description to my newsletter. If you sign up for my newsletter, you'll be notified when that course comes out, but you'll also get some free cheat sheets and some other cool stuff. So check out a link in the description below and you can sign up for that. Okay, so let's just go ahead and jump on into it. So here is the app that I created. Now, like I said, you can look in the description below and grab the GitHub repository and you can follow along. Also, in my last video, I went through how to upgrade a Vue 2 app to Vue 3 and set up the shims and everything for TypeScript. So you can check out that video as well. Essentially, it's not too hard. All you need to do is take a Vue 2 app and you just basically do a Vue add, Vue next, and that'll upgrade it to Vue 3, and then you just have to kind of change out some of the shims, which you'll see in the repository if you take a look. So if you don't remember, this is what the app that we created. It's really simple, and I think obviously in the real world, you would never use a Vuex store for something like this, but for the use of an example where we're gonna walk you through how to set up TypeScript with it, I think this is perfect because you can notice that you can add TypeScript to the simplest apps, but this can definitely be used for more advanced apps too. So you just click press me, it updates the counter, and then it's also shared between two different routes. Really simple. That's all I'm gonna show on this app side. But we will come back to this to make sure as we keep adding things that things don't break. Cool. So here's the app that we created, and you can see here we have these shims we have in place. We have a shims for Vuex, and this is basically a way for TypeScript to come in and know what things are. So by putting these shims files in the source folder, when the app loads, it kind of knows what these keys are, and we define them. So we're defining like Vue runtime to use this custom component custom properties in the store state. And then there was a missing type for useStore. So we just went ahead and created it inside here. And this was a problem with beta 1. As of this recording, I am using Vuex 4 beta 4, Vue router beta 4, and Vue 3 RC4. It is very close to coming out, so that's really cool. And if you remember, this is the store that we have right now. We're using just one exported type called state, which has this counter in it. And now we have this createStore here, which we have the state, mutations, actions, and getters. And then on our counter view, you could see here we grabbed the useStore, which we grabbed from there, and now we have some very basic types. So if we do store.state, we see counter. You can see that right in the Visual Studio Code window. So we're getting some types, which is really cool. You can also see we can have getters, commit, dispatch. But one thing you may be wondering is, well, if we have commit and dispatch and everything, like, are those typed? So right now, if I do commit, no, they're not. They're not typed. We could just type whatever we want in here. We don't get anything in our browser, or excuse me, in our Visual Studio Code or VS Code letting us know that there's a problem or error, which is what we kind of want to fix, because once we get larger and larger apps, we want to be able to have these types and be able to know instantly how to commit or dispatch something without having to worry about looking it up every time. And then, of course, it'll lead to less bugs. So I'm going to kind of take this a little bit slowly, and we're going to just start with the store. And by the way, I'm going to link in the description too. There was this awesome article by Andrew, who actually did created some TypeScript types for us out of the box. Instead of having to come up with it all our own, I'm going to use some of his types that he created. So yeah, I'll link this in the description below, and thanks Andrew for doing that. Cool. So here is our state. And so I'm going to kind of break it up into a few sections here. I'm going to break this into mutations and action enums, which is one way of kind of handling this. And then we're going to grab, we're going to declare the state, and then we're going to set the state. So I'm going to move this around here. So we actually declare the state right here. We already did that part. And we're setting the state right here. We just have one counter. It's really simple. So we kind of did those two. Now we need to come up with the mutations and actions. So in Vuex, there's a few ways to do commits and dispatches and actions. One popular way is to create a like static name that you can then add in everywhere. And a great way to do that in TypeScript is using enums. So we just do export enum, and I'm going to call this mutation types. And it's just going to be an object, and one's going to be called inc counter set counter. And so that's going to set a counter. And then I'm going to do one more. I'm going to call it enum, and then we call it action types. And this one's going to be called inc counter as well. And that's going to be set counter. It's a really simple example. By the way, I don't need semicolons. So now I have these action and enums, and I can now use these inside my store. So now we want to create the mutation types. Now I already created one here, but we're going to redo this in a second. So I'm going to just keep these out. Nice thing about exporting them all out like this, we could certainly put these all in the same file if you wanted to. But I'm going to export a type, and we're going to call it, actually we're going to just keep this simple, mutation types. And so when I do these types, we're declaring types that we can use in our app. That way it'll give us an error if what we create is not what we expect. So this is going to be export type mutations. And then we're going to use s equals state. Now the state in this case is this one right here, the set state here. And what we're doing is we're doing s equals s state. So let's just keep going here. And then this is going to be a mutation types dot inc counter. And this will be state s and payload number. And it's going to return a void. So here's our first type for our mutation. And so we're using this s equals state. This is a sort of a way to use generics inside our TypeScript. Once again, if some of these concepts are a little bit hard to understand, I would definitely look at the TypeScript documentation. There's a lot to it. Essentially saying is that this state, it's this mutation, this mutations is going to be a type state, and then we can use this state over here. So this state is a type state, and this payload is a type number. So that's it for the mutation types. And now we can define the mutations. So what we're going to do is do const mutations. And now we're going to talk to something you may not have heard before. It's called the mutation tree. And this is a part of Vuex 4. And Vuex 4, this essentially defines like what a mutation is supposed to look like. So if I actually hit control dot, I believe it's like command dot in the Mac, you can automatically do imports. So I'm going to add mutation tree, which I went ahead and added to the import from Vuex. And then I'm going to do this and mutations. And what this means is it's doing an intersection between the type we just created and this mutations tree. And now we can kind of define what this mutation is going to be. So we know it's a mutation tree and its mutation. And by the way, it's already giving us an error that you actually you can't have a missing type. It can't just be an empty bracket. That doesn't make any sense to it. It has to basically implement a mutation tree in this mutation. So then I can do this mutation types dot inc counter, and then we're gonna do state, and then payload number, And now we can do state.count equals payload. And actually the state I call counter. There we go. And the payload I misspelled. Payload, there we go. So now we have defined a type and a mutation. But how do we use this to make sense? Well, we'll keep going and we'll define everything else and then I'll show you. Next thing we want to do is create some special actions. Now this is going to be a little confusing, but we're going to create an augmented action context. And we're going to do a commit. So essentially, we're going to use this as a special type that we use later on, and it'll make sense in a moment. So I'm going to extend the key of mutations. There we go. And then we'll just import it from Vuex. So this is a special type that we're going to be using that basically tells when we do an action that we have to dispatch it in such a way that it can be dispatched to a mutation. Basically, you can commit a mutation inside of it. And so this omit means that it's going to take everything in action context, which is all the different action contexts, and it's going to remove commit from it. So we're basically defining our own commit on here. Next thing we're going to do is the actions interface. Export interface actions, and that's going to have action types.inc counter. And now we have a commit is the first parameter, and now we're going to use that augmented context. Now payload is going to be the next one. It's going to be a number, and we're going to just return back void. So now we have defined an action. And then finally, we need to actually, defined an interface, but now we're going to actually finally define how it handles actions. So you can do const actions here. This is action tree. And there's an action tree and a mutations tree. It just kind of changes. This is going to be state. We're going to do an intersection on actions. That's the interface we just created. And now we can use our action types inc counter. And we're going to do a commit here. And this commit is going to be of mutation types.inc counter. And then we would actually have a payload here, which we'll do like this. And payload will be type number. And this commit here. Oh, so we just need to import a Vuex. Cool. So we went ahead and got that in there. So next thing we're going to do is getters. And we're just going to have a very simple getter type called getters. I'm just going to have it double the counter. I don't know, just for the heck of it. And that'll be number, type number. And then finally, we'll do the actual getters itself. And we're going to export const getters. We're going to use the getter tree, which remember is like a way to define what a getter is. And I'm just going to make sure I do control dot so I can add that to my Vuex. Getters. And that's going to be, I'm going to do double counter here, state. And that's going to return state.count times 2. Counter times 2. And now, so there's one last thing we need to do. And so we have all these types in place, but we need to create our own like store type. And the store type will be very helpful and handy because then we can use that instead of this useStore shim that we've been using that doesn't really have very good types on it. And it uses the basic store type, which is just basically nothing. So let's see if we can create our own store type. So this is where it's going to get a little bit crazy. I'm just going to copy and paste in here, and then we'll explain it. Okay, so I'm going to copy and paste that, and I actually need to do one thing here. I'm going to do store as Vuex store. This is kind of just an alias. Vuex store will be an alias for store. And then, so here's everything we're doing here. Let me hide the sidebar. So we have this commit options. Let me make sure I add that, and dispatch options. So what this is saying is this is a new type called store that we can now use everywhere we need to do things. And what it's saying is we're going to Vuex store. This is basically everything we could do in Vuex store, and we're going to emit, commit, getters, and dispatch so we can write our own types for these. So commit is going to be extension of mutations, which is our own definition that we created, which is supposed to be this encounter. Extends, by the way, this is just the parameters of it. This is just a weird TypeScript thing. And once again, we're grabbing the second one. And then it's saying that key is the key. You have the key, you have the payload, which is P. That's the second one here. That's why we're the second extension. And options, if you want to do that. And commit options is a part of the Vuex store. And then we're also defining getters. So it has a return type of getters and a dispatch, and it should have this kind of look and feel to it. So that's essentially it. And I want to thank again Andrew for creating that here. It made it a lot easier to come up with this. But we're not quite done yet. First, this createStore is the old way of doing it. So I'm just going to comment that out. Now the new way we're going to do it is we're going to do an export const store, lowercase store, and we're going to use createStore, and it's going to be an array. And we can actually do three things. We're going to grab the state, so that's this lowercase state here where we set it. And then we need to import in our mutations, our actions, and we're going to use our plugins too. So there's actually another one too, modules. Someone asked me before, can you do modules with this new Vuex 4? Yes, you would, instead of passing the state, mutation, actions, you can pass in modules, and then each module could be like a whole, you might have to change some of the types, but it could be a whole types thing like this, whole page like this. So one thing I kind of want to show you guys too is this create logger. This was, I believe, in one of the betas, they added this. It's part of Vuex 4, and it just adds some nice logging. So we can just add that in to Vuex. Cool, so now we have our new store here. And I just want to double check to make sure I didn't break anything, because if I go to the main file, okay, so I'm still importing it correctly in here. And then I want to go to our shims. I don't want to use this useStore any longer, so we're not going to use that. And then when we grab the useStore, we're going to go back to our counter here. And instead of using it from here, we're going to import useStore from this ..store, if I got that right. And just make sure it's right. Oh, we have to actually create a useStore. I'm sorry. I've almost forgot that. So this is where all our hard work comes in. So we're going to export a function called useStore, and it's going to return store as store. So we created that type, this really big type called store. So now we're going to return the store as store. And now we can use useStore in here. But you can already see there's a problem. So when we created this new store, we noticed that we now have, we're dispatching, we have a double. We're now dispatching a double counter. We're also doing a mutation to the payload. And this mutation right here is just equaling the payload. So we have to actually pass a payload in now. And right away, we could see it's giving us an error because it expects more arguments. So let's see here, store.commit. Now we can't just put anything in here because now we have types on our commit, which is really cool. So now we know that we have to use action types. Well, this is actually a mutation. So mutation types dot increment counter, and then whatever you want to increment it by 1. So I'm going to save it and see if it works. I don't have any errors here. And so let's see if it still works. Cool. Okay, so it incremented what it's not incrementing anymore. It's just adding it 1. So we could change that. So right here, we are just state counter equals payload, so we can do plus equals. Let's see if that works. Cool, so now it's incrementing as we expected. which is really cool. And we can do the same thing with actions if we wanted to. Store dot, now we have, we have getters too. So we have a double getter. Let's take a look at that. So let's do a const double getter equals ref store dot getters dot, see, double counter is already there. We'll make sure we pass double getter out. Well, let's just call it double counter. That makes probably more sense. Double counter. And we'll pass double counter out of here. And we'll just make sure we use it, I don't know, just right underneath here. Double counter. Let's see if that works. Oops, I actually made a couple of bugs here. First, I went ahead and added a double counter in here, and I put double counter here. Actually, I need it as a computed property, so I set it as a computed property, and I'm just returning store.getters double counter and returning it. And then also inside my store, I needed to make sure that I return getters, otherwise it wasn't gonna work. Cool, so now refresh it here. You press button, it doubles this, and also you can see right here, I see the mutation. This is part of our logging that we added. I don't see, can you see it? Yeah, you can see right here, there's this mutation, previous state, mutation, next state, which is really cool. So now I can see it sort of working in real time, and every transaction will show up in the console. This is really great when you're trying to troubleshoot things. All right, so that's all I got today. By the way, it's giving me an error in this action types because I didn't use it. I could create another one called like action inc. Let's see if we can get that one working. So this would be like store.dispatch, and once again we have types on the store. So now we use our action types dot increment counter, and I don't know, we can increment this one by 2, and then we can, I don't know, return this action inc, and then instead of adding it by 1, we can add it by 2, and we can do that by doing this. We can do action inc. Is that what I called it? And now if I refresh it, now you can see it's doing it by 2 because I'm doing this action increment and stuff. But once again, it's completely typed, so I can't accidentally like type something that doesn't make sense. Also, if I do this mutation type inc counter and then I try to pass in a string, it gives me an error that it doesn't expect a string. It's not assignable to type number. So it's really cool all the things you can do here with actions. And obviously this is a whole lot of stuff to do to add in this store, but I could see there's gonna be libraries. You can also you could probably create these once and then reuse them everywhere, especially if you're using modules everywhere in your app. And as long as you have kind of the same look and feel, these types aren't too hard to use. Just try to use this action tree, mutation tree, getter trees, and then extend your own version, your own types for it. So love to hear what you guys think about this. Leave a comment below. And also, I did a video last week on the Best Web Developer Bootcamp. If you haven't seen that, Andre Nagoya has a really cool platform. I'll leave a link in the description, but I mentioned that I would give away one of his courses for free for the next year. And I went ahead and picked somebody. It's Abdigale Drowy. You went ahead and won. You won. Email me at the email I have on GitHub. And then, so we're going to go ahead and give him the free year. So thanks once again for checking out. Appreciate it. Bye.